Welcome everyone to the snack program offered by the Rotary Club of Milwaukee every Thursday at noon. The snack is different than our Tuesday programs as there's a little less to it. You will find it to be less formal than our Tuesday program, but certainly no less quality. We have great quality programming here, and the whole program will last about 30 minutes. Typically, we feature a Rotary member or a Rotary connected organization with ideas pertinent to how we are living today. Today, we'll hear from Rotarian Wendell Willis, Executive Director of the MPS Foundation. Next week, please tune in at noon on Thursday as we welcome David Kohler, CEO of the Kohler Company, to discuss the postponed Ryder Cup and how COVID-19 has impacted Kohler with Rotarian Richie Burke. Feel free during the program to submit your questions via the chat button at the bottom of the screen. I'll keep an eye out for them and share them with the speaker once the planned remarks are complete. However, feel free once we end the program, the formal program, to just jump in and with your own questions for Wendell. As I mentioned, this is intended to last about 30 minutes, but sometimes the audience has more questions than can fit in that time frame. So feel free at 12:30 after we close the regular meeting to stick around and stay and have some more conversation. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce Wendell. One of the great things about SNAC is getting to know our fellow Rotarians. As you likely know, Wendell is currently the Executive Director for the MPS Foundation. He's been in that role since 2018. And it is his job to work with the region's philanthropies, corporations, and individuals on a variety of programs that impact learning and achievement for the system's 78,000 students. He joined MPS in 2015 as the Chief Operating Officer, and prior to that, he served as the Vice President of Operations and Corporate Officer of Ways to Work. He also has extensive experience in nonprofit and corporate roles. In addition to serving on Rotary's Board of Directors, he also serves on boards for the Wisconsin Conservatory of Music, the Ascension Southeast Wisconsin Hospitals, the Northwest Side Community Development Corporation, and the Zoological Society of Milwaukee. Wendell's a Milwaukee native and a graduate of Rufus King High School and Northwestern University. He and his wife, Ann, have 3 children, 2 who are currently enrolled in MPS and 1 who's a proud alum and I understand is off at college somewhere. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Wendell.
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you, Mary and Rotary, for having me today. We always love to talk about our story at the foundation and what we do, and we appreciate the opportunity today. So Michelle and I will kind of power through the presentation that I have and really want to get to the conversation and questions that you all have, but obviously want to keep myself on task and make sure that I'm getting to kind of a couple of milestones or things to talk about today so that you have a really full understanding and enriched understanding of the foundation's work, what we do, and how we do it. So you can go ahead, Michelle. So for today's conversation, I think the first thing we want to talk about is why we exist. We also want to talk about, our work pre-pandemic. It was probably very significantly different, and now we moved towards providing some solutions to big problems. And obviously, all of us have been facing some daunting circumstances. I also want to tell you about what our current focus is today, and then, we'll peer into the crystal ball a little bit and try to figure out what's next for our students, what's next for our community. So we exist solely to provide equity for MPS students. And really, many people don't know our story. We were actually formed in 1998. And actually, fellow Rotarian Jackie Hurd-Barber, former Rotarian Tina Chang, John Kersey, and several others in our community got together with then Superintendent Dr. Driver and said, let's make this a true 501c3 and an organization that gives our students what they need, when they need it, and so they have the true opportunity, like many of us have had as alums, to achieve our fullest potential. Now, from the perspective, many people will say, well, what exactly are our students lacking? They're lacking really the resources, and I'll get into that a little bit deeper, but I think the first piece to understand is that many people will ask me, well, Wendell, Milwaukee Public Schools is a billion-dollar organization. How can you be lacking resources? Well, it's pretty simple if I give you a few examples. I think the number one piece is don't take it from me, take it from another fellow Rotarian, Rob Henkin, the Public Policy Forum, and they talk about the fact that for several years going forward, MPS has faced in prior years and moving into the future some systemic issues that he details in length year after year after year once he looks at the school board budget in totality. You can go ahead and advance. So, again, another example of that is the unequal funding. So let's use a simple comparison. If we take Mequon-Thiensville, and I'm just picking one of the many areas that we can pick to choose from, the state funding formula is really not equal. So when you say a Mequon-Thiensville student, the state has prioritized that they are worth $300 more per pupil than an MPS student. Now we know that's not totally true, but because their funding formula, they get that extra $300. What it equates to when you multiply that number by the entire district population, it's a $23 million gap. So, if Mequon-Thiensville is well-funded, or we think it's well-funded, but they even have booster programs, PTOs, and you have organizations like Elmbrook School District having their own foundation, or you have the foundation for Nicolay, just one school. There's no reason why Milwaukee Public Schools shouldn't have a foundation putting it on a equal playing field for our students. The other piece to think about, so again, using that Mequon example, they have about a 7% poverty rate. We have 82%. So there's a number of supports. When you think about that $1 billion, it's drained very quickly. So what I try to tell people, we exist to be the premier destination for our business and philanthropic communities. And with us, you're going to make collective impact immediately. So what does equity look like? I'll give you a few examples very briefly. Many of you would be very surprised to find out that late 90s, early 2000s, many of our schools cut out field trips. So we try to make the field trip, put it on steroids a little bit, call it a learning journey, and combine the field trip aspect with curriculum, combine that together, and try to take an entire grade bandwidth. So what you see in this slide is our students going to Berner Botanical Gardens, all of our second graders learning about food science, where does food come from? Equity, again, on the left of your screen, you'll see that Starnes Early Childhood Center, that was the before a couple of years ago, and we got involved in doing some outdoor space renovation. Many of our spaces have over 100 years of decay and neglect, and really we're looking at it and saying, we wouldn't stand for this in any other area, so let's get involved and help with the renovation. And so today, we have a great outdoor space. It's a great learning lab. It's a great play area off of 27th and North. So if you have a chance to drive by there, in a number of areas, probably 10 in the last 2 years, we've renovated with funds from Milwaukee Public Schools Foundation and through our donors and partners. Equity. So, prior to this conversation, some of us were just talking about Joan Robertson and, the work that her family has done around United Nations. So for the last several years, they've been sponsoring a United Nations Model UN program. We call it the United Nations Schools of International Learning. In the last several years, we've had over 3,000 students down at Panther Arena talking about why peacekeeping, peacemaking is important, cultural relevancy, and a number of our students, you'd be surprised that one of our fastest growing populations is both Hmong, Somalian populations within MPS. And we really value diversity. We value our differences, and asking why that makes us greater is a conversation that our students, we want them to have, understanding negotiating skills. So we really leave nothing on the table for our students to think about and learn. Equity, again, I think it's a real treat. In one of the crowning programs was working with, and still working today, with Julia Taylor, Vicki Martin, and many others with the Bradley Tech Trade Commission, putting in a brand new welding lab, courtesy of Bucyrus. It's a pretty cool lab, to the tune of wanting the Bucks to be involved and getting our kids to become tech turns and help actually build the new arena at Fiserv Forum, as well as having Jill Biden come and Dr. Jill Biden come and ask our students, what is it that they want to do with their careers? Where do they want to go? So I think some pretty cool opportunities come across with our students when we have that collective impact in those partnerships. Equity, again, this is probably my favorite program, not only because I'm a member of the Conservatory of Music Directors, but I think many people don't understand that arts have been cut out for years and years and years, and the district has done a great job of bringing it back, working to both build back the educational professionals we have in the system, but obviously it's hard to keep and attract music, arts, performance teachers. So one of the great projects that they've done is partner with Wisconsin Conservatory of Music, Arts at Large, other organizations to bring in arts during the day to act as that surrogate when you don't have an art teacher. One of the areas the district really didn't have the ability to bring was for our students at two of our most challenged schools, because the needs of those populations are physically frail, and they have a number of wheelchair bound and students that are blind or deaf, and they have impairments. So what we were able to do is put a program in with Wisconsin Conservatory for students that have almost never had music instruction. So I'd love to show you a small clip of what that looks like in action. This is Javon. He has been awesome with this program. And working with the conservatory, not only did we find that Javon had this hidden talent, as a student who's blind, typically wouldn't have been in a music instruction class. Those are specialized drums for him. And 2 years later, he's now at Rufus King, and he's budding to move into varsity. So he's on JV right now, but close to being a varsity drumline player. So he's also taking individual lessons at the conservatory virtually as we speak today. So it's a pretty great story for Javon. So let's go to pandemic. That was all of our pre-pandemic work. The pandemic sets in, we all have to go home, but we go home with a lot of thoughtfulness. Initially talking with my friends and colleagues in the district proper side, we said, what's the biggest set of needs? Well, before we can worry about learning and instruction, we've got to take care of simple, basic needs for students. Our students, we know a number of them they need nutrition during the daytime. They're getting their breakfast, lunch, and an afternoon snack from us, and that may be the only meal they're actually receiving. So, working with the collaboration, the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, their civic response teams, Gina Stilp at GMF, the nutrition team at MPS, and a number of partners, we're able to make sure that we not only provided food for our students, but immediately we saw a population that's never been asking for food from us, which is adults. So knowing that that population really isn't going to be reimbursed, it's going to be a district expense out of pocket. The foundation, we said we would take care of those expenses and find partners. So whether it be Herb Cole Philanthropies, one of our alums that, we like to highlight, Carl Rasmussen, is a Madison area attorney that stepped up and said, hey, I'll be willing to help. Or, comedian in the Fox Valley area happened to find us, Charlie Behrens, and gave a very generous donation and kind of pushing through the social media what we're doing. The secondary piece of that basic need was our school supplies and household supplies. Many of our families were not able to get both their school supplies home or have a kit of supplies ready, or even just academic enrichment, whether it be crossword puzzles, games, etc. And then secondarily, right, when you're in the city, there was the run on hygiene supplies and things you need for your household. So we had a number of individuals, through Zilber, the Joseph and Vera Zilber Family Fund came to support that work. Chris Middleton of the Bucks, he and his team said right away, just, what can we do for students? And then the American Family Insurance Foundation right away, again, stepped up. So we had a number of people, this work, it always takes a village. So that was the key for us, identifying kind of what I would call basic needs number one. As that's happening, the work doesn't happen in a bubble. So talking with our district friends, and we said, let's keep peering forward. We're sending everybody home. What do you need? Well, the great thing was we were well prepared several years, but had the angst of execution. And what I mean by that is we were able to get, one of the crowning achievements I had as COO was being able to deliver the funding for having Chromebooks and a 1-to-1 ratio of student to Chromebook. Well, we never pushed those Chromebooks home. You know, there's the deployment and the semantics and the operational piece of that. Obviously, that all goes out the window in a pandemic, and you just say, everybody come get a Chromebook and take it home. We'll deal with the rest later. What we started to find, and we knew this was going to be some sort of challenge, but we weren't sure how to solve the challenge at that moment, was we knew there are a number of areas in our city where our students did not have internet connection, because obviously many parents are using the internet on their mobile phone, or they have a internet connection that really is for 1 or 2 people in the house, but not 4 or 5, so the bandwidth's not there. And then believe it or not, there are many areas in our city that we do not have internet at all. There are just dead spots where Spectrum and AT&T do not operate. Secondarily, you know, many of us have the privilege and opportunity to be able to pay for that service at a $45 to $150 a month bill. Many of our families do not have that luxury. So we stepped in and really, you know, we have to give credit where credit is due. Tina Chang, the MPS Foundation board member, owner of SysLogic, and former Rotarian, stepped to the plate, talked to the mayor, talked to the superintendent, and said, let's go. I knew this was going to be a challenge. We're mobilized our entire board around a campaign, something like we've never done before, and said we're going to get $1 million raised before the first day of school to make sure every student has a Wi-Fi hotspot. So Tina, working her connections in the IT telecom world, was able to develop a solution, working with the IT department at MPS. On our end, the foundation side, we mobilized and went to every partner that we've ever worked with and said, this is the time to really step up. You know, new partners came to the table, and through a myriad of ways and through a number of people, we were able to report out that we raised that $1 million in 82 days, a feat that the foundation has never achieved. And one of our crowning achievements, I think, is a team, both from the board on down, you know, everybody involved with our work. And I really can't thank the community enough for stepping up. You know, we said we were going to do it. We were able to deliver for our students. So that was a big win. And we were very satisfied with kind of you know, being able to deliver all 3 initial basic needs. So let's get to today and what's happening at this moment. So we've got everybody a Chromebook at home. We've got everybody their internet connection. And as we speak, 50 to 70 hotspots are still going out daily because many of our parents haven't said, you know, I've got 3, 4 students at home. They may also be going from one place or another because I don't have, you know, dedicated childcare at this moment with schools not being open. So people need maybe more hotspots than they initially entailed on the onset. And we've always said you probably need about, you know, one hotspot for every 2 students using that hotspot. So it's out, it's deployed, it is working. The crux that we knew was happening next, or the challenge we knew it was going to need to be met, was the enablement piece, right? So every one of us, right, we have our device. You know, I'll pick on Mary a little bit at the beginning. You know, we're working her through a challenge with her phone and being able to see everybody on Zoom. Every one of us has had a technology moment we cannot solve. And what we're finding is a number of our parents, this is the first time we're asking to log in, not only to log in on their device, to log into certain software, to log into sites, to keep track of usernames, to keep track of passwords. And the district and many school districts around the country were not built for tech support. So if any of us at home, we know we buy a product, and if we buy a product from Dell, we go get Dell support. If we buy a product from Best Buy, we get Geek Squad. If we're at, you know, if you work for Northwestern Mutual, you've got a help desk to call. So what we've done is we've taken our help desk at MPS, the 11 professionals there, we've augmented it with other professionals in the building that may not be in true school settings, and they're all beefing up to be that help desk support for our parents, for our students, and for our teaching staff. We also only have 2 people or 2.5 staff that are really dedicated as background coaches for our teachers. So what we really are working on now is that phase 2, which is making sure that tech support is there for families, teachers, and students. We also want to make sure that the coaching is there in the background, and teachers that want to have certification, they can actually have that training and that backbone and that structure they need to become expert in their content. So if you're a Montessori teacher, we'd love to provide you with the right Montessori software. If you're a STEM person, the same thing applies to you and every other bit of curriculum we have across our many platforms across our schools, rather than saying one size fits all. But we need that expertise. So as we look to this campaign, we'd like to raise another $1 million to really offset some of those costs for the district. And then moving forward, the district can be thoughtful, planning, and add that staff to its budgets going in the future. As well, one of the things I'll just bring up that we see happening is the need for childcare and child support. So, our rec department friends they're providing that throughout the day. We've got a number of partners that have, and I'll use Jackie Hurd Barber as a great example. She worked to get Metcalf Elementary a surrogate tutoring mentoring program in with John Daniels and the MKE Fellows in last spring, and carrying that work through the summer and helping to make sure that our students are on track. So it may not be they're teaching with the teacher, but it's somebody there that can either help you with your work, that can give you and coach you along and just say, hey, what's happening today in your life? What happened today in the school where you weren't really you weren't staying focused on your Zoom call or your Google Meets or your Microsoft Teams, whatever it was, we can make sure that that student was kind of there. So we have a number of people working in those supports today, but we can always use more. So the crystal ball, what do we see? What's going to be moving forward? Well, I think the first thing is that we're still going to be providing work to finish off this phase 2 of Connect Milwaukee. The secondary piece I've been talking to a number of our partners about is at-home academic kits or supply kits. So really what I look at there is saying, if you're a STEM school, if you're a Montessori school, doesn't matter who or what you are, can you get a kit that keeps you involved? We're already seeing at this moment, we're getting closer to November. There is a little bit of fatigue happening from being on Zoom and being on screen all the time. Imagine that. Before we couldn't get our kids off of screens and off of PlayStation. Now they want to be off the screens because it's a little bit of an overload. I mentioned the tutoring and mentoring support groups. So we really want to make sure that a number of our partners in town, and we can develop some new partnerships based on what Jackie and Metcalf put together, that we can say, this is what's going to be helpful. Because, as you pick up the New York Times, you pick up the Washington Post, and many other magazines and articles are talking about the slide that will happen from last spring moving into this year. It could be as much as a year or 2 years of being left behind. We're not going to let that happen to our students. So we're going to find enough people that want to take the challenge of helping our students through this year. And then a couple of last things, I think, is we've been talking many times about, making sure our kids have safe places to be as we're in a pandemic, as the numbers are going the wrong way. Over the number of last few years, we have helped, like I said before, augment and revitalize these outdoor spaces. That work's got to continue. I'll use myself as an example. Within 5 blocks of me in 2 directions, I've got great outdoor spaces to partake in. My kids have the ability to stay safe outside, can distance with friends, and stay active. And we know our students are going to need that. They need the physical activity. They need a break mentally. Those are the types of things we need. So, when I say equity, many of us have had the opportunity to, have our mental health walks and breaks in safe places, to be, very positive in what we're doing in outdoor exercise, et cetera. We've got to make sure as we go into next year and future years, regardless of pandemic, in pandemic, out of pandemic, our students have an outdoor space to be proud of. Our neighborhoods are revitalized, and everybody's got an opportunity that, you'd say you have in your Brookfields or anywhere else. And lastly, I think overall, this offers the opportunity for us to all rethink education. Many of the things that we've done, whether it be programmatically, with partnerships, in the schools, outside of schools, it has been around student engagement and increasing that engagement to meet the need for tomorrow's student. As we sit here in the 21st century, our students need everything to be hands-on. I held up my iPhone earlier. None of us had that. When we were going through school, we were kind of told to sit in the chair and listen to somebody lecture us for several hours throughout the day. We know that's not the right style of learning. And for whatever reason, it's been hard to change that mindset. So I think, as we combine these hybrid versions of digital learning and online learning, within the classroom instruction, we finally have the opportunity to rethink what we're providing to our students and come out of this better. You know, I would hate to see this moment where we leave and go back to exactly where we were. I think you can talk to, you know, the folks that run the Harvard Public Education Leadership Program, or the Aspen Institute folks, or the folks at the Council of Great City School. All three entities study these things and would say what we were doing previously worked to an extent, but it wasn't truly working for all. So can we leave this moment and get much better where we were? So, you know, lastly, I'll leave you with this. You know, I think we used to have some of the coolest kids ever. You know, it was cool enough for Jennifer Bartolotta to call Jerry from Ben & Jerry's to come hang out with our students. You know, the Bucks and the Brewers like to hang out with our students, and Speech from Arrested Development likes to hang out with our students. So, you know, there's a role for everyone in this community. We are the foundation for student success. I would ask that you call me, text me, email me, and find out, you know, how you can be involved, because we have 70,000 students. They should be the lifeblood and the pipeline of our talent pool for this region, not just Milwaukee. And, you know, much to my board chair, John Kersey's chagrin, I will wear the Northwestern patch because I want everybody to understand you can get anywhere from MPS. But, you know, I think we can make sure that our students achieve at their highest level. So I want to make sure that everyone in our community really understands this is the time to support our students. This is the time to make sure they meet their goals and their dreams. So thanks for having me on. And with that, I'll take any questions, comments, thoughts.
Thanks so much, Wendell. That was really interesting. We've got a couple questions that have come in. Darren asks, if we in America provide education as a right, don't we as a nation have an obligation to provide connectivity for our kids? It would seem that this should be one of the most critical long-term goals government should seek to tackle.
So very interesting that you bring that up, Darren. I just happened to be involved with somebody that actually happens to be close to the Biden campaign, and not to get too political, that is one of their agenda items. And this is something that, you know, Tina Chang has brought it up. This, for us, this is the first step, right? We're gonna make sure MPS kids have the connectivity because we have the emergency moment. But Tina's conversation with the mayor, with the superintendent, and multiple people, whether it be City Forward Collective, whether it be Milwaukee Succeeds, she has been banging the drum that what we have here is a systemic issue of not building infrastructure, and telecom has not been thought of like, you know, a utility. A utility is built in, and even when you can't afford it, they're making sure you have the opportunity to access it. So we've got to think about basic needs differently. We think about basic needs as typically food, shelter. And, you know, I joke, you know, every night on our TV, there's a certain show, right? And during that show, when it plays, there's always an ad for jobs at Kroger. You can't walk to Kroger and get that job. You've got to apply online. So what do you do if you don't have that? We've got to make sure that basic need is there. I think, you know, regardless of political affiliation, I do believe that both administration or both sides of the aisle are really going to have to take a good look at this, because it's not a red or a blue issue. This is an all issue that we've got to solve sooner rather than later.
Thank you. I actually had a question about during the pandemic, how kids with special needs are doing.
Yeah, you know, it's not easy. That is our you know, most challenging set of students, and our most frail and our most vulnerable. And in many times, frankly, we don't want them to be at home. We built, you know, I was involved in building a number of supports that, you know, from 3 o'clock till 6 or 7 or 8 o'clock at night, that they're cared for in our buildings, and that's the safest place for them to be. But I think we just had to balance it and say, you know, this is something we've never faced. We don't know. And, you know, I'll use this, and it may be, you know, not politically correct, or may not be the right set of terms to use. But, you know, for us, we have had a number of students die, whether it be, and I've had some that have died in our watch, you know, crossing the street by a bus. And when you have unlike some of our suburban counterparts, we have not had to console parents the way, you know, they have not had to console parents the way we've had to. And when you're holding a parent, you know, I've had the experience of holding a parent whose child has died. You don't want to do it for any unnecessary reason. You don't want to put teachers in harm's way. And, you know, there's no doubt in my mind that we were going to make the decision to stay home and be safe, but we have a robust number of individuals on 66th and Capitol that said they were going to roll up their sleeves. About 600 employees work in school specialized services and keeping track of our students. So using telemedicine was the number one piece. Working with our agency partners, whether it be, Aurora Family Service or St. A's or somebody else, getting to those agencies in town and saying, we've got to figure out supports. And that's really the population that we do want, if they can, get to our day sites and be out of their house so we can provide on-site support for them. But, a lot of home visits as well, right? So our teams are, we're running through PPE as fast as we can. And we've been lucky to have a number of philanthropic partners step up on that piece as well. But, I think that it really does, it's tackling this from multiple levels. So I think, we've had a number of people that have said, whatever you need, we're going to help you. It's not perfect, but, what I have heard is that, I'll use a household that's near ours, down the street from us. We have neighbors that are MPS professionals. So one teaches during the day at a high school, and he said this has gone better than he ever thought it would with his high school students because they're actually focused. It's a dedicated time. It's not all day. If you are in a classroom with somebody who's disruptive with you, you're not there anymore. His wife is working in school specialized services. She's like, telemedicine is not perfect, but you know what? We do have tabs on our students. We know what's happening and we have supports. It's not ideal, but we're getting it done.
Okay, so it's 12:31, so I think Michelle is going to let us go to gallery view, but I have a couple more questions. Steve Chevalier says, summers off for students seems like an idea whose time has passed. Do you hear anything that would indicate MPS might consider year-round learning?
So Steve, that's a great question. We have, so we left all of those, we essentially moved most of our year-round schools to an early start calendar. In this market, year-round schools, in many cases, ended up in parents enrolling and then de-enrolling and re-enrolling to basically have year-round daycare, and it wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. So making that change was huge for us. I think, it is high time, and I think it's a societal conversation, right? So I just had this with a programmatic partner in town called the Literacy Lab. They run a Young Men Fellows program where young men of color go into the schools and are secondary teacher aid. And Bernard Roming is the executive director here locally of that group, or the program manager of the Wisconsin branch. And we had a very lengthy discussion last Friday, and he said, there is no reason to continue with summer break like we do. If you look at European countries, it's a 30 to 40-day break. You have other breaks throughout the school year. But as we look at what's happening, right, we've built school. Well, school was built first in 1850 for going home in the summer because your parents needed you to work on the farm. And now we shifted the farm to your professional day. So why in the world are we shifting that around the parents' needs? And I'll use my own son as an example, right? He's thriving from being online from 7:30 to noon. He's done, he's getting his work done. It's done in the afternoon. He can go, whether it be wanting to go to work or whatever he wants to do in the afternoon, it's taken care of. I'll use another friend of mine from Venezuela. He said, school for them was 12:30 to 5 every day in high school. So yeah, I think we need to really rethink our societal priorities, and then how do we match what our students need? I don't think you need to be in a school building all day unless really, again, we talked about the home life maybe being where it is, but you don't need somebody standing in front of you for 8 hours lecturing to you. That's not going to make you learn better. That's probably going to dissuade you. And we've got many examples, right, of students that have been unengaged because somebody's lecturing at them all day long.
Thank you. And then Jessica Gatsky asks, can you talk about access to food? Are families using the resources to access food?
So families are using the resources. The spring was our highest utilization that we've ever seen, 20 to 25 meal sites, so 20 to start with, then we added 5 mobile sites. The summer always dips a little bit. It maintained about the same, but a small decrease. And what we added over the summer were so keeping our traditional, I would say keeping the original 20 stop, grab, and go sites happened from spring through now. Additionally, over the summer, the rec department added its meal sites to augment that work going on. So now rec has reduced its sites to build up its capacity to serve students during the day. And what we're seeing is a small decrease in the number of meals being served. So we're not sure why. We're relying on our community partners to try to help us figure that piece out, because obviously no one just all of a sudden figured out their food security issue. And obviously with the number of people that are losing jobs, you know, we would have expected that number to go up. Now, last conversation I had with some of the MKE Response Civic Group folks has been that we anticipate November, December, January, it rising significantly. But I think we do have to do some analysis in the last month or month and a half as to why that number went down.
Great, that was the last of the questions in the chat. Does anyone, if you're interested, you have another question for Wendell, just unmute and ask away.
So I just
Great opportunity. You know, number one, thanks to Jackie and the board's leadership. We put some tough challenges out in front of them and in front of the city, and we've asked people to step up in ways they haven't before. So, you know, I think we've spent a kind of a long path of 2 years from 2018 to now, really trying to build goodwill and authenticity and working with, you know, with a number of community partners to be where we are at this moment. So, you know, it was kind of because, you know, it does take a village, because we've got some great board members and we've got a great team. You know, it's a 2-person shop with some contracted help and public allies. You know, it's a small but mighty team, but I think the number one thing was that we put the right blocking and tackling in place so that when this time came about, there was no, there was really no question as who and where people could step up to help us. You know, I go back to, you know, 1 or 2, you know, I'll use this one phone call is a good proxy. You know, Lori Murphy from the Green Bay Packers, you know, we had just a couple of exchanges. I would say call it 4 exchanges in the last 5 years. And, you know, she called and said, I know what is happening in the city of Milwaukee. I know what your students are facing, and I trust you. I trust your group. She's like, I've done enough digging in the background, right? I can Google all your people. I can Google Peter Fagan. He does some work with Mark Murphy. I can Google Jackie Hurd Barber. I can Google John Kersey. And she's like, this is solid enough for me. This is the easiest check I've ever had to write. So I think that's, to me, the key is that people are stepping up and understanding what our students need, but we need more on the journey with us, you know, not just the individuals. I think we need corporate champions at this moment to really step up and say, we're going to support our students at a level that's unprecedented.
Great, thank you so much, Wendell. This has been really insightful, and keep up the great work.
Thank you all for being on. Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Thanks.